thing that happened around the same time, maybe a couple of years later, I think 2005, was I met Jason Rhodes, who was a very excessive artist. That's him on the left. I met him actually at Art Basel in Miami. And he and I started talking about this famous picture of Jean-Michel Basquiat that was on the cover of the New York Times Magazine. And he was obsessed with Basquiat, and we talked about the picture, and by coincidence, I lived across the hall in Manhattan from the woman who took this picture of Basquiat, Lizzie Himmel. So it was a strange thing. And we arranged for the next time that I was in LA that I would take a picture of Jason that would be an homage, but let's call it a ripoff of the Basquiat photograph. So I took the picture and there it is. It's a suit with no socks on, and there's a banana in his hand. I'm not entirely sure of the significance of the banana. About 6 months after taking this picture, I got a phone call from David Zwirner, the gallerist. And he said, hello, is this Jason? And I said, yes, this is Jason. He said, this is David Zwirner, the gallerist. You don't know me, but I have to ask a favor of you. And I was like, yeah. And of course I know you, or I know who you are. And he said, Jason Rhodes died last night of an overdose. And he really liked this picture of you that I took of him. And the New York Times is asking for a picture for the obit column. May we give it to them? And I said, of course. I mean, actually, it still sort of gives me the chills thinking about that. And the thing why I tell this story is that this really did galvanize me to take my artist project that much more seriously. I felt like I wanted to photograph for my own sake. I felt like I wanted to capture history of my time. And I was doing it in a way that I was thinking, okay, these pictures are going to be interesting when all the artists are dead and I'm dead, and it's sort of looking back. But all of a sudden I was realizing now is the time. And so it did galvanize me. And then I went about, seeking out artists who, were heroes of mine. And if you have a camera, that's one of the great things. It can be an entree into an artist studio that you can't have without a camera. And to a certain degree, I mean, I fell in love with visiting artist studios when I was at Carnegie Mellon. And 30 years later, I still love visiting an artist studio. I mean, nothing against going to a Chelsea gallery, but like going to an artist studio is just the most fun, as I think everybody on this meeting knows.
Okay, so I also think that before you are inspired by Joe Sanford, you really should know his work, because Joe Sanford is really a phenomenal photographer, extremely smart, and an amazing technician. And Joe's pictures are one of, in my opinion, the ultimate, ways of fully detailed and wonderfully described landscape and culture, and I think that this is a really great inspiration. I really do believe that, and be happy to talk to you more about that. But your work seems to be suffering from some technical issues, and I think that it would benefit the work to have better description, less yellowness, little, more information. Not that it has to. I think that, I can come up with 10 different photographers now. If I'm going to go and piggyback on Inez, Robert Frank was the worst technician in the history of photography. He's never made a single photograph that was sharp or well exposed. That doesn't mean that his pictures are not great, And I also think that it's very different staying in one place, doing a work on a place like Jamestown, and I can give you tomorrow 15, 20 different books to look at. And I think that the Americans is a different actually approach, specifically when it's done over 2 years and it's all over the country and it's done by sponsorship, and it is a Swiss guy and he is traveling with his family for a year out of that. It's a more about the road, you know, and his experience. And I think that being in one place, you know, is something that we can look at a lot of photographers tomorrow. I will actually make a list for you to check out in terms of photographers who stayed in one place, who actually worked consistently, who are trying to describe and see this place as a kind of a mirror of American society, you know. And I think that this is what you're trying, you know, even though the most of what you're describing is depressing. I don't think it's in you like that. I think that with time and with more work, you will have a much larger spectrum about the place, and it's going to be easier for you to sequence a body of work that will be truer to your vision.
And I proposed to this curator, it's like, hey, you know what we should do is let's go ahead and build this gigantic wall of bulletproof glass. We'll have really thin outline of this map, and then we're going to hire a sniper or a marksman, not really a sniper, but a marksman, to sit on the other side of the museum. And you know, the museum will be open, there'll be an audience on the other side, and they'll just fire at the audience, and it will stop at the bulletproof glass. And I knew that there was just no way this was going to happen, but you know, but I just thought because this curator's pulled off some really crazy magic in the past, and I was like, let me just throw it out. Let me just throw it. Let's try to figure out how we can do this. And to my surprise, I was just expecting them to say, "You're crazy. There's no way we're doing this." But to my surprise, the museum was like, you know, let us talk to our insurance people and our people, and we'll get back to you. In the meantime, we did some ballistics tests. So this is what happens. So this, you know, when you're hitting bulletproof glass, you actually aren't hitting, it's not really glass, it's very dense plastic. And the plastic, essentially, when the bullet hits it, it comes at such a velocity that the plastic melts and it fuses back together. This is what happens inside your body when you get shot, except your body doesn't magically refuse itself back together. So we did these tests, and then they called me and said, yeah, you're absolutely nuts. There's no way we're doing this piece in person. So we had to do this we had to actually get this built off site. And then the issue of this is a show in Europe, so we're trying to do this on site. And it's like, I can't actually, you know, we couldn't take the risk of building it in the US and sending it to Europe because it actually has real gunpowder in it. It actually has trace elements of, like, you know, so we don't know whether Europe would be considering it as importation of art or importation of firearms, and that gets really complicated with customs and that sort of stuff. So we're like, you know what, let's just leave it. You know, so let's just build it in Spain. So we built it in Spain. So
initial engagement it used to be the most important thing. Now it's like, it's no longer the most important thing. It's the second or third most important thing. So what I also learned from, you know, from looking at the data, you know, like all of those little charts that the people at Instagram were sending to each other, is I was generally assuming there's about 10 to 14 factors that determine whether each post gets seen or not. It turned out that there's about 1,400 factors that determine whether each post gets seen or not. And like, you can't even, like, the human brain can't even keep track of, you know, you can't even keep track of 10 factors really. No one can keep track of 1,400, which is why they have, you know, like a multi-billion-dollar company, and they're paying a lot of people to try to figure this out for them. The fortunate thing is that only a few of those factors really matter. And so we're just going to go through all of them.
So I did a sort of a zoom in with a microscope in the university that I worked with. And we did a zoom in each part of the mouth. So we dissected the mouth, and we took samples of the eyes. We took samples of the eyebrows. We took samples of the hair and the body. And I took these images, and then I projected them in front of a sculpture that I did, that it's this one over here with the needles over here. Part of the exhibition was also to give the audience the experience of look in the microscope and see what a cocoon looks like, or what a moth looks like in a microscopic level. And so there's more into this project that I really want to mention, but I really know that time is on front. And I just want to end the presentation with some of tips that I've been, like writing down when I gave a talk, and maybe some questions. And one of these, I'm going to give some quick tips. And I think it's really important to wander in movement, to be curious, to pay attention to forces. And this sense of forces is that intuition that sometimes there's a question, but you're not sure if the process is going to happen this way or the other. So intuition, I think for many students and for me, it's really important. Another tip is we move by the process of art taking form. So in this sense, is go with the process, or we'll go with the flow. Make your own move, act in the doing, find your rhythms for being form, and doings that moves with us. So that doing that maybe you're just experimented, but you're not sure if that is moving, just feel it. And I think that will be really, really powerful. Unfolding potentials for activation of life in the making. I think putting attention to live experiences or live daily processes, I think that's where the art resides, or where that's the root of the art process. And so I can give you more tips, but I think these are a lot. Thank you so much for your time.
So in the moment, I thought this photo, was interesting just because of the way they were standing and, being together, but not being together. And then it's kind of taken, it's taken on a life of its own. And then I put this next photo in there because I wanted to bring up, I have a few photos taken in this exact spot that some of them are with a person, some of them are just the landscape. And sometimes in my practice, I do that. Even though I focus mostly on portraiture, I do find it really helpful to take multiple photos in a location.
You mean without the subject?
Yeah, without the subject. I mean, I do, I do intersperse landscapes and details with my portraits a lot of times when I work on a project, but I find it really helpful sometimes to even I guess we could call it scouting, to go and take some pictures and figure out how I want to pose my subject, or how I want to just let them be in that space and then capture their image. And also, especially working with these slow cameras, it was really helpful for me to test out exactly, what I wanted to do. So yeah, that's very helpful. And then this last photograph is, I don't know if you guys have talked about this much, but it's always interesting to me with portraiture, like what can be considered a portrait and what is not, what can kind of divert from being considered a portrait. Like, is absence more powerful than presence?
Another artist that I want to highlight in the exact same way, in some ways, Keith Morris Washington, who's actually was a calling of mine here in Boston. He's teaching at Mass Art. He's a painter. And I want to talk about two specific bodies of work that were recently relatively made. The first one is Within Our Gates, that you can read here. And interestingly enough, even though he's working on site-specific places, a lot of artists working in site-specific places will either make a photograph, right, to quote unquote document or commemorate this place, or will actually do something there in terms of monuments, right, or something like that. Keith, on the other hand, is kind of breaking the place apart and creating several different values while making a painting about those spots. And specifically those sites, as I mentioned before, are sites of lynching.
Maybe I just get nervous, like by having, after I photograph the pieces in the park, I'm trying to maybe keep it the project or the whatever alive, because if there's this kind of, okay, you make the thing and then you document it and then it just dies, you know, and then it goes away. So like now I have these documents, I can make my grandma's scrapbook and then maybe do that. So maybe it's a way to kind of keep it alive longer than it is, because it does, if I didn't do that, they kind of, partly the plastic bag ones they don't last long. And so how do I, beyond documenting it? Because the documenting it seems in a dead way to me. It seems that's their end, right? It's the chalk outline.
But I think that's an interesting, what you're just saying, just automatically leads me to Barth and his, you know, premise about photography. You know, in every photograph, he sees his own death, essentially his own mortality. And that, you know, the mere act of a photograph is something that has been, right? And so I mean, that just, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh my God, here's like a moment where, you know, connecting this need to keep something alive, maybe, which is, you know, counter to, you know, Barth's, all his death analogies.
His death.
More positively, though, Barth also says that every photograph is a certificate of presence. So if nothing else, it verifies that it was, you know, which is better than never having been.
Is this the Bart off? I'm very excited about this. This is like a rap battle with Bart.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm happy to be here.